Hi, I'm Sarah and I'm from Pattern Union and I'm a pattern maker, sewer and teacher of fashion.
And my name's Sue and I am a blogger under the name Fashionista.
So Sue recently went to an exhibition in Bendigo to see the Sumekko exhibition, and she came to me with the idea to make a dress which has a large print on it. And we were so excited about it, we decided to do a collaboration and actually produce a pattern and print for you to do. So behind us we have some samples of the Sumekko dress and with the printed designs, and these will be included in the pattern.
I need to say at this point that it's not a direct copy of what I saw at Bendigo. Sarah has put her own unique twist on this dress, and it only has one seam at the back instead of the side seams you would normally expect.
And so what's great about this dress is you can personalise it too. So today I'm wearing a singlet which is based on the Sumekko dress, and Sue's wearing another version of it with a gorgeous obi belt without the print on it. So you can really play around with this and hack it to make it your own. So here's the pattern, and I've printed out on an A0 sheet of paper at my local printer, but you can also print out the A4 pages and tape them together yourself. So I'm just going to show you how to alter this pattern to suit your measurements if you don't fit exactly into the chart. I don't fit exactly into the chart because I'm a classic pear shape, whereas Sue is a classic triangle shape. So we're going to make this pattern for Sue. Based on the measurement chart, she's a medium for her bust and an extra small for her hips. So to do that, we're just going to blend between the sizes. I'm going to mark the medium on the sort of chest area, and down here you've got a line indicating the hip, and I'm just going to mark the hip line. And then I'm just going to use a ruler, and you can use a French curve if you prefer, and I'm just going to blend this line, scooping it in slightly at the waist and blending down to the hip from the medium to the extra small. And it's as simple as that. If I was doing it for myself, I would blend from the hip into a smaller bust measurement. So I'm going to trace this onto Vilene and we're going to cut this out. I just want to point out that there are waist shaping options. So you can choose to have one dart on the back or two darts. Even though Sue is this classic triangle shape, the fact that we've got two darts in the back means that she gets a nice bit of curvature into her hip, into her waist. And you can also use the waist darts at the front, but I don't recommend doing that if you're going to print the fabric because it would interfere with the print.
So the other thing that Sarah does with this is she traces it onto Vilene. So if there's a strong print like this one, you can see through for pattern placement. And to get it all onto one sheet of AO, she's actually put the skirt going in the other direction at the bottom. So
you'd need to join the two together for maximum length.
Yep. So it saves on printing costs, which is very clever.
So we've cut the pattern out in Vilene and we've got our fabric. It's nice and wide so the whole pattern can fit on there. Because it doesn't have a side seam, it is particularly wide. The fabric's folded in half and I've got the centre front on the fold. I'm just going to use pins to mark the points of the dart before I cut it out, and then later I'll mark those darts in with a fabric pen. I don't like to use pins particularly for cutting out. I like using weights, and this fabric isn't moving particularly, so it makes it easy. And the great thing about Vilene is that even if you have a bit of a breeze, you can see I'm flapping around, it just doesn't shift, which is great. All right, Sue and I are going to cut this out.
And of course a blade would work really well, a rotary cutter would work really well on this as well.
It would.
Rather than a pair of scissors.
I like the speed of scissors.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to mark the darts. So I just want to show you a really easy way of marking them. I like to use these friction pens. I like the felt tip ones because they draw on fabric really easily. But always check do a tester on your fabric first, because sometimes they do leave a little mark.
And they will come back if you live in sub-zero temperatures.
That's true. Sue did a great experiment where she drew on several fabrics and put them in the freezer.
I did.
All right, so where the pins have gone through, I'm just going to mark with my felt pen where each one of those pins comes through. And then flip it over. And then I'm going to mark it on the other side. Just like to point out that I actually folded the fabric right sides together so that I would be able to mark these pins easily.
I think when I did this one, I used tailor's tacks in the back. Yeah, because I'm a bit old-fashioned like that. And I couldn't get anything to really show up on the black and the white. It was really difficult fabric. Yeah. So tailor's tacks work really well, but I'm probably going to spend the rest of my life pulling red thread out of the back of my dress.
So now I've got my markers for my darts. I'm just going to use a ruler and I'm going to draw in the lines so I can see where to sew. Then I'll turn that over and do the other side, and then we are ready to cut out our stencil and print our fabric. It's exciting, Sue.
It is. The other lovely thing about this violin is it doesn't really hold a crease, and it's very easy to fold up, and it sits very flat in an envelope or whatever you store your patterns in.
And it doesn't tear.
It doesn't tear, and you can actually sew it.
That's true.
And glue it if, like me, you leave a bit off.
Or if you change weight and you just need to alter it slightly, it's fantastic for that.
It is.
Right, okay, so here I've printed out my stencil on an A0 sheet of paper. This is an earlier version with more sort of open patches for you to download and print yourself. I've filled those areas in to make it a bit more clear. But the idea is that each one of these is going to be unique. And so when you're cutting, you can have a sort of loose, wobbly line, and that gives it a much more organic feel. And if you cut through something or you don't like it, that's okay too. This is a one-off and you're making it. So we're just going to cut this stencil out.
I love the fact that here I am, I'm going inside the black, outside the black, and it actually doesn't matter at all. So
no,
I have less control than Sarah in this process, but it still works out okay.
That's right. So even though I've been doing this for a long time and it's relatively new for Sue, it just doesn't matter. Sometimes the things that are done by people who have less experience actually end up working out to be more interesting too, because it's new.
It's also, you have to think about it, it's a negative design, so the black is the bit you cut out because that's where the colour is going to be.
That's right.
So it's very useful to get your head around that. I think it took me a couple of goes before I really worked out that, oh yes, I've got to cut the black out because that's where the paint will be going in. And I'm here completely missing my line, and I'm not at all concerned because I know I'll just get a slightly thicker bit there or a slightly thinner bit, and nobody knows.
No, and sometimes that's where the most interesting details come from. So you can see the black sections are starting to lift out, and don't be worried by these sort of curling white areas. We're actually going to use a spray adhesive, a quilter's adhesive, just to hold those onto the fabric when you're printing.
Peel away the white, because that is the part that's going to be placed onto your fabric. This, I think, is a much easier way of printing on fabric than, say, screen printing, which is very messy.
And uses a lot of ink.
And lino printing, which Sarah and I have had a little play with. And whilst it was a really interesting experience, this has been more fun, this process.
So we're kind of applying a few techniques with this. It's kind of like a silk screen print, but we're just going to use household products that you probably already have around to make this design work.
So it's just a big piece of paper, so nothing special for the stencil. And the advantage of the stencil is that you get a clean line. So when I first proposed this to Sarah, my Sumekko dress, I was just going to freehand paint it, and Sarah suggested that we make a stencil, which sounded all too hard to me. I was quite resistant, sorry Sarah. But at the end of the day, it's just been the best thing. And you can see my leaf is starting to come away.
That's right.
And I've got a little piece that I cut out that we'll just stick back in onto the fabric so that we paint around it. So my suggestion as a complete novice is that when you do a design, you either use one of the ones that Sarah includes with the pattern, or you do something really simple.
Yes.
So that you haven't got a lot of detail, because the more detail you have, the more cutting out you're going to have.
That's true.
And you might give up, which would be so sad. Even if you just printed a small flower on it coming down somewhere, it's about, keeping it simple, keeping it manageable within your skills. Of course, if you've done lots of this, you're not going to have any sort of a problem, and in fact this might be too easy. Your stylus, your blade properly is another thing. Sarah had to give me a lesson because I instinctively went that way, and in fact you cut that with the point going down rather than pointing up. Keep your finger close to the end so you have more control.
And make sure you do put a cutting mat underneath the blade to protect the surface of your table. In one. And I think they look rather lovely cut out and make quite nice decorations.
If you did it with red, it might be a good Christmas decoration.
All right, let's print it. So here's our design. It's all cut out and we've flipped it over. Now I've put a protective surface onto the table. This is a piece of wool fabric that I was gifted. Seems kind of wrong to use it for printmaking, but it's really nice and absorbent, and it has a cushioning effect too, which is great when you're doing stenciling. So this is just some quilt basting spray. And this is a great idea because once you've cut it out, you'll see that some of the pieces just flap around a bit, and by putting this glue on, it will hold it on the fabric when we're doing the printing, and it will keep everything in place. When Sue and I did the last one, we didn't use this, and it did make it a little bit tricky at times, so this really helps. So give it a good shake, and you don't need to spray the whole piece of paper, just the areas where you're going to be stenciling. So I'm just going along the edges, lightly spraying it. And that's enough. So now we're going to put the dress on the table, opened out, and we're going to need to place the stencil so that it looks nice. So what we want is it's sort of starting around this side of the body, sweeping around, and because we don't have side seams, it can sweep around to the back as well. Okay, now we're ready to print. So we opened out the dress, making sure we've got the right side up so we can't see the dark markings. And we've sprayed our stencil with glue and placed it onto our dress. Now you want to just think a little bit about your placement, about where things are going across the front. So I quite liked the sort of, with this orange design, sort of the way it creates a bit of a V in the negative space, but you know, everything's going to work. You can also put a few weights down just to hold it as well. When you're printing, you can use any sort of fabric paint. I like to use Permaset, which I get from craft shops. Sue has also got tubes of paint from Bunnings. So long as it's a craft paint, it will work.
A fabric paint, is that better?
Or yeah, fabric paint.
Fabric paint.
Yeah, it needs to be something that can wash. You'll notice that some areas are lifting slightly, or you can't see that on screen, but that's fine because when we start printing, they'll get pushed down. So when we're printing, you can use things like foam rollers. Again, you can get them from craft shops.
And Bunnings.
And Bunnings, yep. Makeup sponges are great. You can just dab around and that gives you a really nice stippled effect, and you can actually sort of mix colours and blend them and get some great textures. If you want to mix your own colours, I like to mix up my own colours, and I just use resealable little pots, and I just mix them up with pop sticks, which I wash and I can recycle. If you're going to use the foam roller or even the sponges, it's good to have a plastic or glass surface that you can put your paint on to get a stippled effect. So I'll demonstrate how to work with your paint. You don't want to have too much either on your roller or on your sponge. So we are about to get started. But first of all, I'll just mention that we're both wearing the Marnie apron. As you can see, it doesn't have any neck straps and stays up on its own.
So it's a boned corset apron, which Sarah has for sale on her Pattern Union site. And we're wearing rubber gloves because we learnt
last time
that lesson the last time we did this. Yes, so, yes, you do.
I will get another glove.
We had very black fingernails last time we did this.
It looked very grubby. Okay, gloves on. All right, so we will start with green. So what you do is you take a small amount of ink, dab it onto your glass.
I'd call it paint.
Paint, yes, whatever. And we're just going to use rollers for this, and we're just going to roll it up and down till we get the roller nice and covered. So start off with a small amount, and then when you've kind of soaked that into your sponge, put a little bit more, and remember less is always more with this kind of thing. If it's gluggy, it'll just make a thick print on the fabric, and then it will lose any kind of draping that the fabric might have. We're using, it's a beautiful bamboo that we got from Woven Stories in Myaree.
Which costs $5 a metre.
Bargain.
Which was a complete bargain.
It was. Thanks, Liz. Okay, so now I'm ready to go. So I'm just going to hold this up to the screen so you can see. There's that stippled effect, and that's really important. That's what we're after. Then we're going to print the dress. So what you do is hold the stencil down and just gently roll along. Just start off lightly at first, and you can just build up the layers as you go. And again, don't worry about making mistakes, you know, it just adds to part of the uniqueness of your design. I don't really believe in mistakes, do I, Sue?
No, she doesn't. Which is wonderful because I make them constantly.
No, you make design features.
Yeah, I do.
It's a nice idea to mix your own colours rather than just using them straight out of the tube. If you feel confident to do that, otherwise everything's fine. So here we're just rolling and stippling, working along the edges. If you're making your own design, you might like to think about positive and negative space. So we've got some areas where there are fine lines and other areas where there are thicker areas of colour. And I think that just creates a balance. Sue did a design which I made up into a stencil for her. another one, which was a drawing that she did. She's such an artist.
I'm no artist.
She is an artist.
I'm so happy with my drawing.
It was a beautiful drawing, and I translated that into a gorgeous stencil, so when we sew up the dress you'll be seeing that one as well. Is it telling you to stand up?
No, it's saying I'm off to a great start.
Good.
Sorry, have to take a photo for my blog.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is peel the stencil off. So let's move the weights off. Okay, so we're going to do this carefully. We don't want to be touching the fabric because we've got bits of paint on our gloves. Well, Sue doesn't, I do. I'm a bit messy. Okay, so we're going to lift it up, peeling the stencil off, and with a paper stencil like this, you could reuse it if you wanted, but really in the taking off it sort of gets a bit crushed. But you could also trace this off onto an acetate if you thought you might like to reuse the stencil. So I'm just peeling it in and rolling it into the middle so any of the wet paint, it doesn't end up on my dress.
One of the things I loved about this process is I've done stenciling before and you have to have a few stencils to get the different colours, but Sarah just blends the colours. So she uses the one stencil and blends her colours, so it makes life much easier.
Them off. But there's our finished design printed and it just looks beautiful, Sue.
It does. I'll take a photo because it's just a really simple little design.
And I love the way that we've just used two colours, green and orange, and blended them together, and when they mix they make a kind of like a brownie colour. It's got this sort of beautiful tones going through it. Can't wait to make this up.
Right.